You're listening to Heritage Radio Network. Since 2009, HRN podcasts have been exploring the wide world of food, beverage, and agriculture. Learn more at heritageradionetwork.org.
This episode is brought to you by 818 Tequila. Delicious and smooth tequila, made in harmony with the earth. 818 Tequila, imported by 818 Spirits Manhasset, New York. 40% alcohol by volume. Drink responsibly.
Welcome to Pizza Quest. I'm Peter Reinhardt, a man on a never-ending search for the perfect pizza. This show is the audio version of the Pizza Talk YouTube series, where I engage in interesting conversations with some of the country's greatest pizza makers and other artisans. Thanks for joining me on this quest.
Well, welcome to Pizza Quest. We're back. We're back for another episode. And we're going to expand a little bit, not only expand our minds, but expand the parameters of Pizza Quest and focus more on quest than pizza. Because today we're going to take a journey with Lou Bank, who is the director of an organization called Sacred, which he will explain in a second, but it's all about agave and mezcal and other things related to that. So it's another kind of fermentation beyond bread dough and pizza dough. And so we're going to hear all about it today. And hopefully even at some point he'll be joined by his partner in this unique and one-of-a-kind enterprise. Chava Periban will join us somewhere along the line. But Lou, welcome to Pizza Quest. And this is not your first time on Pizza Quest. You and I did an interview together about 4 years ago after I met you at the Fermentation Festival in Wisconsin, the Ferment Festival, as they call it. And I got to sit through a whole presentation and sip through with you a tasting of mezcals, and you cooked an amazing traditional dinner. I mean, it was unique and wonderful. And so you were kind enough to come and do a written, like we did a verbal interview, but not a podcast because we didn't have this podcast thing going then. And you've got your own podcast on HRN, the Heritage Radio Network, that's called Agave Road Trip, right?
Yeah, it's funny. I guess I'm like I'm old school Pizza Quest, right?
Yeah, you're old and new. You're on the beginning of the quest and the never-ending quest that we're all on together.
You know, it's so funny. That feels to me like that festival where we met each other was so long ago, Peter. It feels to me like decades, and it couldn't have been 6 years ago.
It might have been 5 years ago. I don't know. I lost track of time. The last 2 years kind of screwed up everything with time. So, but I wish I could get back there. It was such a fun event. You know, there was so many different aspects of fermentation going on. I had my share of kimchi. I did a workshop on bread making. You did the mezcal. And then there were artists of all sorts, all scattered through like a small town in Wisconsin. And it was like a 2-3 day Ferm Fest. It was all about fermentation.
Yeah, they're bringing it back this year. It's going to be the end of September, and it's going to be more. I mean, slowly trying to rebuild after the pandemic. It looks like it's going to be a 4 or 5 day festival.
Wow! I'd love to get back out there for that. And of course, being in Wisconsin, you couldn't have a fermentation festival without a lot of cheese. And so I got to do a lot of cheese tasting, which was great. I learned a lot about cheese that's paying off in our Pizza Quest and focus. So, it just, the learning never ends, as does the quest. But I see you've got this great background there. You've even got our Pizza Quest logo, and then you've got your logo. Now, what tell us about that pickup truck behind you?
Yeah, sure. So that's the logo that Chema Scandal made for our podcast, Agave Road Trip. And it's really, it's funny. I don't think I've ever driven a pickup truck. I'd never driven one in Mexico. I might never have driven one, period. But in essence, when you drive through the back roads of rural Mexico, it's not uncommon to see one of these pickups or a truck like it, and to see. And you need a truck because the roads that you drive on, they're not like roads. They're like dried up riverbeds. I mean,
it's bouncy.
But they'll be full of agaves, and they'll be full of garrafones, glass bottles that are, more often plastic bottles, if I'm being honest. Because You get it. But that are just full of these beautiful heritage agave spirits.
And
So
that's
yeah,
really what your mission is all about is championing and protecting and sort of supporting and being a kind of part of the rooting section for these small batch distillers and people who are making specialty mezcal, not like what you find in the liquor stores here.
yeah. It's funny. The name of the organization is Sacred, Saving Agave for Culture, Recreation, Education, and Development. Um, but it took me a few years to really wrap my head around it. But like, while the agave is incredibly important and biodiversity is incredibly important, and we'll talk about Dan Saladino's book, Eating to Extinction, at
Mm,
some point. But what's really striking me is the importance of this multi-generational wisdom that these families utilize when they're making these spirits. The spirits are great. The spirits are delicious. Um, and they're the most visible representation here in the USA, most visible representation of that multi-generational wisdom. But the thing that I really love and the thing that I want to support, as you suggest, are these people who
yeah.
who are utilizing these ideas and these thoughts. They come at the world from a different perspective than I do, where efficiency isn't really even part of the equation when they're doing something. Is it
Mm,
efficient? Is it not efficient? They don't care. All they care about is the end result.
mm.
And that approach to the world is so different from mine, and I would say from the the parts of the world that end up making decisions about how to solve problems. And I've seen these communities develop solutions to problems like water insecurity and food insecurity, climate change,
Mm.
see them develop these approaches to it that I think we need to incorporate into the broader approach that we're taking as a planet, as a species.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of represent the essence of what the slow food movement was all about.
Mhm.
It's, and number one, uh, I remember when the slow food movement began, and the big focus was preserving and protecting flavor, real flavor, the flavors, authentic flavors from foods that have been basically watered down.
Right.
And in my recollection of the presentation that I first did with you, one of the things was that there were flavors we were tasting, and we're going to get to do some tasting today, by the way, so don't go anywhere, folks. But that we were tasting spirit beverages, these mezcals that were not like anything I've ever. It wasn't like your everyday tequila. It wasn't like anything, even your top shelf tequila. It was like these were all over the spectrum of flavor profiles and extreme depths of flavor is what I remember. That was revelatory for me.
Yeah, the thing that I find fascinating about it is this approach that they take in these communities, that they often take. It's, there's certainly people who are doing things in a more efficient way, but the things that I love, the spirits that I love, tend to be made by hand using pre-industrial methods and using a broad range of agaves from a broad range of communities. And as a result, I think you get a much wider breadth of flavor than you get in something like whiskeys, where it's like I think whiskey can be defined, and I love Scotch. Don't I don't need the people from Scotland yelling at me,
Yeah,
but
right.
right. But I think you can define it within a much smaller box than you can these heritage agave spirits, because when you're talking about open air fermentation and all the different bacteria that are going to be at play in that agave, like I think you just end up getting a much broader range of beauty.
Well, we say in our sort of catchphrase with what Pizza Quest is about, our website, the subtitle is a journey of self-discovery through pizza, but also it's a celebration of artisanship wherever we find it. And in this case, in this instance, what you're really talking about, true artisans, these small batch, distillers. And so some of the people who are listening probably listen to your podcast as well, and this may be review for them, but for the benefit of those who are kind of new to the spirits and agave world, let's get some fundamentals out of there. Like, what? First of all, the first question, of course, you probably get all the time is it mezcal another kind of tequila? And so,
Right.
what's the difference between tequila and mezcal? And then let's talk about how this is made, because it has to stay small in one sense, because it's not like the craft beer business where you can make huge batches of beer and there's plenty of grain to ferment. You're fermenting agave cactus, right? And
Well, so agave isn't a cactus.
it's not okay.
succulent.
So that's
But-
another
but-
misconception, because we all
but-
think of it as a cactus. Yeah.
But in fact, the problem is you can make it in those large batches. So this is, in fact, I mean, again, to reference Dan Saladino's book, Eating to Extinction, this is sort of the salient point is, so you've got, let's get to those basics and I'll try to explain
Yeah.
this in the basics.
Yeah.
So in the same way that you've got whiskey as an overarching category, and
Yeah.
then you've got Scotch as a kind of whiskey, and bourbon's a kind of whiskey, and Fireball's a kind of whiskey. That's not a category. That's just a little joke. The same way, right? You've got agave spirits as an overarching category, and then tequila is a kind of agave spirit, and mezcal is a kind of agave spirit, and raicilla is a kind of agave spirit, and bacanora, and these are all denominations of origin. So in the same way, right, that champagne has to be made a certain way in a certain place, and then it is certified and sanctified as champagne. Same thing with tequila, same thing with mezcal, same thing with raicilla, bacanora.
I see.
Same thing, yeah.
So when we say mezcal, we're talking about an agave spirit that's produced primarily in Oaxaca. Is that the region of derivation, or is that another misconception?
Well, I mean, it gets. I don't want to get too far into the weeds on this. When you see the word mezcal, that means it's certified as mezcal. But if you go with us on an agave road trip into rural Mexico, you're going to go to places where they're referring to their agave spirits as mezcal because that's the traditional word that they use, that their families have used.
Mhm.
But that word was plucked from them by the Mexican government when they got the denomination of origin. So that they're not allowed to legally use that. They still do. You talk to them, they're going to say mezcal. But, and this is the important piece of this, is if you're shopping in a store in the USA and the bottle doesn't say mezcal, it says agave spirit, in that community, it's very likely that they're still calling it mezcal, but that family, for either geographic reasons or financial reasons, or because the definition of mezcal is that was defined by the Mexican government in order to create that denomination of origin, changes how they would have to make the spirit in such a way that they would literally be breaking their cultural heritage in order to utilize the word.
Wow.
So I say, it's really confusing, but I say
Yeah.
all that to say, if you pick up a bottle and it doesn't say mezcal on it and it says agave and it says Mexico, don't assume that it's bad or it's cheap or like
I see.
just yeah.
There's these restrictions that have something to do with government getting in the middle of it, and also marketing and all sorts of other things. It reminds me a little bit of the pizza rules, out of Naples, that a true Neapolitan pizza has to be made with a certain flour and a certain tomato baked at a certain temperature in a wood-fired oven. Those were the strict rules. And then there's the way everybody does it, which is basically breaking all those rules. But you can't put on the window of your pizzeria that you have a VPN pizza unless you're following the rules. So,
Oh, will they actually go and certify, like in Brooklyn, would they certify a place?
the people, there are some pizzerias here in the States that seek out that certification because it indicates that they're trying to follow the strict rules that were established in Naples. Now, we think these are ancient rules. These rules were established like in the 1980s, and it was basically by a marketing board who were just worried that Naples, the brand of Naples itself, was getting diluted by the fact that people were calling their pizzas Neapolitan when they weren't following these strict guidelines. So there was a good intention there, but it got to be a little bit of something people call it, the pizza police.
And I hate to be the one to break this to you, Peter, but I think the 1980s actually are considered ancient now.
Yeah, well, that's true. I'm in denial about that.
But anyway, so to get back to tequila mezcal, right? So tequila, there are a number of rules, but the most important rules are if the bottle says 100% agave or 100% blue Weber or something like that,
Uh-huh.
that means that it's 100% agave. Whereas if it doesn't say that, if it just says tequila, then that means up to 49% of the sugars don't have to come from agave. They
Agave.
can
I
be
see.
corn syrup or
I
whatever.
see. So
Yeah.
it could be anything. But if it says either mezcal or agave spirit, then it's likely to be 100% from agave.
If it says 100% agave, it's 100%. If it doesn't,
Oh,
it's not necessarily. It could
uh-huh.
be,
Yeah.
but it's not necessarily. With tequila in particular, if you want to bottle your tequila outside of Mexico, you can't call it 100%. So you could purchase bulk 100% tequila in Mexico, ship it to the USA, bottle it here, and it's still 100% agave, but you can't say that.
Oh.
So it can also only be made from blue Weber agave, and there are
And,
like 200 to
and
300 kinds of agave.
so a blue Weber is a specific kind of agave, and that's the one that's the most prolific, would you say, or the most commonly used?
Well, oh yeah, absolutely, because tequila is far and away, like right now, mezcal is something like 2% of tequila in terms of production.
Wow.
So
And tequila is always associated with the blue Weber.
always blue Weber, always blue
Uh-huh.
Weber, and it can only be made in the state of Jalisco and then 4 other states, but just municipalities in those 4 other states.
And I'm sure they
Um,
pay dearly to be able to call it tequila.
I suspect there was some backroom dealing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
These designations don't come cheap,
right. But
especially when the government's involved.
but as we were talking about large batch with the beers and the breweries, like there are very large batch tequilas. Like they figured out the way to convert this large plant into alcohol using industrial methods. It's not like it's impossible to do it, even though when you think about your sugar source to make other alcohols, it's always something tiny. It's like a little grape or a little grain or a little
Yeah.
sugar cane, and then you get to agaves, and they'll be 100, 200 pounds, and trying to manage that giant sugar source can be
Yeah.
difficult.
Well, I remember you showing us a slideshow of the process itself of cooking them down and the different the whether it's a gourd or some kind of a homemade thing or steel still that they were using. It's really a pretty fascinating process. But let's get one other elephant in the room out of the way. What's the deal with the worm? When I told my wife I was doing a podcast today with you, and we're going to be talking about mezcal, and she said, "You mean the one with the worm?" It's like, and neither of us are big, spirit drinkers, so we have maybe some liquor in the cabinet for when we have company over, but we're not experts in this. But so what's the association with the worm?
Yeah, I don't know. It's funny. Like for like I've heard a lot of stories. Nobody knows the truth behind it. In essence, mezcal. When I started drinking mezcal, the first time I had mezcal,
Yeah.
I should say, it would have been like 1989, 1990. And
The ancient days. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. The ancient days. It would have been way back then, and at a housewarming party, somebody brought me a bottle, and it had the worm in it, right?
Yeah.
And I think the truth of it is that it became sort of a marketing thing. This is how we distinguish mezcal from tequila. 'Cause,
Yeah.
when you got a bunch of gringos coming down to Mexico and you're trying to market something, like we need a simple message. And the simple message was, oh, well, the difference is we have a worm in it.
The worm is the icon.
pure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because my first association with that was like, what was the movie, The Urban Cowboy, something with John Travolta, and again, a 1980s movie where he plays the guy who wants to be, a cowboy, and there's a bad guy played by Scott Glenn, and there's a scene where he just swinging this mezcal, and then he just eats the worm, and that became a famous scene from the movie because everyone's going, it's a cringe scene, but that association got locked into people's head. Oh, if it's got the worm, then it must be mezcal,
But I'll tell you, the worm itself is actually a delicacy. It's a worm. It's a larva. It's not a worm. It's a caterpillar, right? And so it tends to live on the agave plant and feed off the agave plant. And it comes out about once a year. I think it's in August, and they'll oftentimes you'll find the gusano. You'll find it fried in oil and then preserved in salt, and they're delicious.
It's a delicacy.
Yeah.
So gusano is the name of this caterpillar, or quote worm caterpillar?
Yeah.
In other words, like your comic book, you created a comic book called Gusano.
El Gusano.
Yeah, El Gusano, which says when things come out of his eyes, people die. Yeah, and I love it. It's like a really graphic, it's Marvel Comics on steroids, so to speak, or on agave. But it's a pretty cool comic, and we won't get hung up on this today. But are there any issues still available if people want to write to you for them?
Yeah, actually, we sell them on the website.
Good.
Sacred.mx is one of our many fundraisers in order to
please go to the website. Yes. So sacred.com is the website, or
no, it's not. It's sacred.mx, like Sacred Mexico. If you go to sacred.com, I think you end up on a church.
Oh, okay. So sacredmx.com. All right.
No. So sacred.mx.
Okay, for everyone who's listening, sacred.mx. And of course, many of you already know this because you've probably been there, but sacred.mx.com.
Just .mx. You can just stop at .mx.
And you're there. Okay.
Yeah,
and you can check out Gusano. So before we run out of time in this segment, though, you mentioned something about how many different kinds of agave there are. So does that translate to different flavor profiles then? Because you sent me 6 different little bottles for tasting today. And I remember the last tasting I did with you, there were so many different each one had such a different flavor. Is that a result of which agave they choose to use, or is it more about the process that they're making it with?
Oh, see, this is why I wish Chava were here, because we'd fight over this. I would say that everything plays a part in the end flavor, right? When you're talking about something that's handmade, though, I would contend that the most important factor of everything is the decisions made by the person who is making it, the man or the woman who is deciding how hot am I going to make this in-ground stone-lined earthen oven before I put my agave in. How long am I going to leave it buried in there to convert the starches into fermentable sugars?
Yeah.
How finely am I going to milk? Like, all of these decisions end up creating this end flavor. And because it's not the stuff that I love, is generally the stuff that is made by hand using entirely pre-industrial methods, because there's not a cookie cutter way to do it. It's so hard for one batch to taste like the next batch. Even if you're using the exact same agave from the exact same place, the exact same tools to do all that conversion, you're going to find this huge range of flavors even within those spirits.
And that's why it's really an artisan, product, is because it's artisanal. It's made by hand, and the hands play a major part in the final outcome. We even say that now with artisan bread making, that scientifically now, sourdough, the people who are doing a lot of studies on sourdough, not just the craft side, but the science behind sourdough, say that the hands themselves affect the flavor because of the microorganisms on our hands.
God, to that point, and I know we're running out of time in this segment, Peter, but I just got to touch on this. One of the things that you were most fascinated by, I believe, during our first meeting, during that tasting, is this community, Santa Maria Ixcatlan, where they ferment in bull skins.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
So it's a family that does this, and the father of the family, I found out on a trip a couple of years after that tasting. The father, Armando Alvarado Jimenez, he does 2 things in the community that he's known for. One is he makes these beautiful heritage agave spirits, what he would call mezcal or Ixcateco. And the other thing he does is he bakes bread. So we need to schedule a trip for you to go down there.
Oh gosh, I would love that. I would love that. Love to bake bread with him and watch him, brew up a batch of of this. And when you said in a bull sack, is that what you called it? A bull?
Yeah, it's the skin of a bull. It's
skin.
literally just hanging from 4 logs.
And that's where they ferment the liquid?
Yeah, the agave gets fermented
My
there
gosh.
so that the yeast that does the fermentation is coming off of the plants that are surrounding those bull sacks. Yeah.
Incredible. Well, so what I think we should do is take a little break here. We'll come back in part 2 of this. I mean, we could go for hours, and of course, for those of you who are as fascinated as I am, you have to go to Agave Road Trips podcast, which you can find on both at HRN on their network, or on your website, or on any podcast server,
Wherever you access your podcast.
There you go. I guess that's the catchphrase. The same place where you find Pizza Quest, the Pizza Quest podcast, but Heritage Radio is kind of like our host site. They're our sponsoring site, and we love them. And in fact, that's how you and I reconnected. Was that we were at a Heritage Radio like little host party. All the hosts that had shows were on a Zoom together about a year ago, and I said, "Oh my God, I haven't seen you in years. We got to get on each other's podcast." So
you introduced me to Heritage Radio.
Is that right?
Yeah, when I came to visit in Charlotte. Yeah, we arranged a tasting, and you brought them with.
No kidding. Wow. I'd forgotten all about that. Because they were also here when we did our bread symposium, and they were recording the whole symposium and creating podcasts from the symposium. Yeah. So it's a small world, huh? And of course, for people who don't know you, you're based in Chicago. You're not based in Mexico, but you spend an awful lot of time down doing these road trips down to Mexico. And maybe in part 2, we'll explore a little bit more after I get a little bit of tasting, into me. Then tell us more about the work that you're doing, the work of Sacred, and some of the amazing people that you're working with and meeting down there. So we'll come back in part 2 with Lou Bank, and maybe Chava Parabound will join us if he. We're not sure because he's down in where is he, in Oaxaca now, or?
No, he's in Mexico. Well, actually, maybe the problem is he's in Oaxaca. He should be in Mexico City.
So he's not, so we don't know if he's got the right time zone thing, but he'll probably jump in. If not, we'll do it again and we'll get him on. But we'll see you all back in the next segment of Pizza Quest today with Lou Bank. We're talking all about agave spirits, and tasting is coming up.
Thanks, Peter.
Stick around for more Pizza Quest after a word from our sponsor.
I'm Chava Periban, co-host of Agave Road Trip on HRN, here to talk about 818 Tequila. 818 creates their tequila using traditional methods at a family-owned and operated distillery in Jalisco, Mexico. From the blue agave they grow to their recycled glass bottle, 818 emphasizes the earth's importance in all they do. Their distillery runs on biomass and solar power, which means they don't rely as much on fossil fuels and are able to reduce their carbon footprint. Their labels, corks, and boxes are all certified by the Forest Stewardship Council as coming from sustainably managed forests. 818 is a proud member of 1% for the Planet, through which they support HRN as well as Sacred, my organization in Jalisco, where together we transform agave byproducts and water waste into adobe bricks that are donated to local infrastructure projects, like a local library in Zapotitlan de Vadillo. Visit drink818.com to learn more about their sustainability efforts and find 818 near you. 818 has been part of so many magical nights for me, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. 818 Tequila, imported by 818 Spirits, Manhasset, New York. 40% alcohol by volume. Drink responsibly.
Welcome back to Pizza Quest, and I'm here with Lou Bank. We're talking all things agave spirits. We're talking spirits today. And Lou, I have in front of me actually to the side of me, 6 little bottles of agave that you sent me, different types of agaves, and a small little shell-like cup that it's called a copita. Copita. Yeah. So again, for those of us who are not versed in all this, I don't know the terminology. All I know is right now I'm smelling agave, and it's intoxicating, just the aromas. But now I've got my copita. So this is for tasting purposes, right?
Yeah, it's funny. People talk, mezcal geeks will talk about, oh, the copita is the traditional thing to drink, and it's not. It's just not. It travels a lot better than the actual traditional thing, which is a jicara,
A
which is
hikara.
sort of like a gourd, a half
Uh,
gourd. It's not really a gourd, but it's like a gourd. And this is what is more traditional for drinking out of. But man, trying to carry these across
yeah.
border, so this makes it much easier.
So the copita is a small little, looks like a little half shell, and it's beautiful. It feels great in the hand. It's almost like a
Right?
little sake cup. The what's the big one called? The gourd.
That's a jicara.
The hikara, though, you could get a
And
lot more mezcal in one of those. Oh,
even
and
better.
then you got a mega.
This is for professionals only, Peter.
Boy, I'm telling you, yeah, you, it would take a lot of mezcal to fill that one, that the big one. But let's start with this little guy there, and why don't you just take me through the tasting, and everybody can sort of vicariously taste with us, and I'll try to describe as best I can my sensory experience.
I like that. So the first bottle I want you to grab, did you start already? Did you just grab one randomly?
No, I just put them out here in random
Okay,
order, but
okay,
I
okay.
didn't start drinking yet.
Okay, I wouldn't yell at you. Well, I might yell at you. Okay, so the first one I
It
want you
won't
to
be the first time.
taste, or the last.
Yeah.
So the first one I want you to pour actually is labeled Zignum, I think, or maybe it's just got a one on it. It's definitely it's
Okay.
one of the green tape ones.
I got the Zignum here. Yeah, it's got with green tape. Zignum what's the Esparine or
Espadín.
Esparine, Oaxaca.
Yeah. So
Okay.
so pour a little bit of that into your copita.
Into my copita.
Yep.
Okay. And by a little, I'm just going to put a tiny little bit so that I can make it through the end of the show. Okay. I've got some in there.
Okay. So the first thing I want you to do, we're going to do this. I mean, we're going to do it slow first and then fast the second time, but I'm going to want you to do the exact same thing on a different one. But what I want you to do is just put this up to your nose and smell it this way.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
It's so, well, it's complex. The aroma's complex, but it's, I don't know what to say.
Peter,
There's a satisfaction.
Peter, I'm throwing you a curveball on this one, so don't go too deep.
Okay.
Is it really that complex, or are you just playing to the audience?
Good question. To me, it's complex. I mean,
Is
I'm
it?
not,
Okay.
well, I have nothing
No,
to
that's
compare.
fair.
Wait, I have nothing to compare it to. Maybe the next one will taste more complex or smell more complex, but it's
There-
pleasant. The aroma,
Yeah.
it's really, really, it's not fruity. It's
No.
just pleasant and kind of there's a richness to it. That's all I can say.
Yeah. So then set that copita down, pop your finger into the liquid into your palm, palms together, and then like you're in a David Lynch movie, smell it that way.
Mm. Okay, so I'm rubbing my hands together with a little bit of the mezcal, and now I'm
Yeah.
smelling it. Now it's totally different. Of course, I'm getting part of it's my hands. I'm getting some whatever that's adding to it.
Probably smells like pizza dough.
But yeah, but it's changed. The aroma has definitely changed.
Yeah, because what you've done is you've evaporated. I mean, this is probably about
Ah.
40% alcohol by volume.
Yeah,
And so you've evaporated a lot more of the alcohol, and you're left with the smell of the cooked agave, in this case, the Espadín agave,
and it's
that
yeah,
was used to make it.
and you had said earlier that different makers cook it at different lengths and things like that. This smells like it's pretty well cooked. I mean, it's not burnt. But the aroma tones are you can sense that they've been cooked. It's not just like raw honey or something like that. There's a cooked quality to it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So then what I want you to do is just pop your tongue into the liquid and then rub that on the roof of your mouth and behind your teeth in order to clear your palate.
Okay, so I've just dipped my tongue in and rubbing it behind my teeth
Yeah.
and up against my palate.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Mm.
then take a small sip, just a half sip, and hold it on your tongue to the count of 5 before you swallow.
Okay, here we
And
go.
so, all alcohol, as I'd said in the first segment, all alcohol starts life as sugar, no surprise, right? And the sugars that are used to make the most complex wines in the world come from grapes And of course, grapes take a maximum of 4 months to reach maturity. And if this were a whiskey tasting or a beer tasting, we'd be talking about grains, which take 6 months. Most cane that's used to make rum takes 6 months. There are some varieties that take a year, but most of it's just 6 months. So you're talking about a sugar source that's at most 6 months old, whereas with agave, this is made from the Espadín agave. This is farmed Espadín, so it would have taken probably 5 years to reach maturity. 5 years as opposed to 6 months.
So that before they could harvest it for the distilling.
Yeah. So which begs the question, what's the difference between a 5-year-old sugar source and a 6-month-old sugar source?
Yeah, what is the difference?
Well, like the difference isn't in the sugar. The sugar is the same. The difference is in the fact that this 5-year-old plant, even if it's on a farm, and it absolutely is if it's coming from Zygnum, even if it was raised on a farm, to live for 5 years out there, it's had to develop and this is a farmed one. If we're talking about like one in the deserts, even more so, but it had to develop all of these mechanisms, these biological mechanisms to ensure that the bugs don't eat it, the plagues don't eat it, that human beings like you and I don't come along and eat it.
Right.
In the middle of a desert, this can be the only food source for miles.
It's got to protect itself.
It's got to protect itself. And so I would contend that this plant is the most complex sugar source that's used to commonly make alcohol. And as a result, the flavors are more complex than any other alcohol. And so when I say that little half sip to hold on your tongue to the count of 5, it's literally because these things can be like the Tower of Babel. Some people, they'll drink it and they'll be turned off. They're like, what's going on? It's too hot. It's crazy. It's because you're not used to the complexity. Now, as I say, I kind of threw you a curveball because I would contend that what you're drinking in your copita right now, Peter, is the smoothest mezcal available on market. The least complex mezcal on the market. So this is made using an industrial method. This is made using a tool called a diffuser. And so what they're doing is they're taking the agave, they are milling it while it's still raw. They're blasting it with at least hot water and maybe some acid in order to detach the sugars from the agave, and then B, start the enzymatic process of converting the starches, they're not sugars yet, the starches, the agavins, in that plant into fermentable sugars.
Interesting.
And then they would cook that slurry of the water and the acid and these agavins. They would cook that to convert to fermentable sugar. They would add yeast. They would put it in a steel drum, closed steel drum, and they would let it ferment, and they would distill it in a column still. Now, the process I just described to you is how the vast majority of alcohol in the world is made.
It sounds like the least, quote, artisan version of this spirit beverage of compared to some of the ones that we're going to talk about later.
Yeah, and it is, and
yet it still works, even for somebody who's a novice like me. It's still pretty damn good.
And that's why I sent it to you, right? Because I feel like I have no doubt that some of the people who are watching this are familiar with mezcal, but I'm guessing a lot of people have read about it or heard about it, and they're interested. And when you talk to a mezcal geek, they'll tell you, oh, this is garbage, you shouldn't drink it. But the truth is, this is the easiest access point, I would argue, for the average consumer who is not familiar with mezcal. But, I want you to taste something like this Zygnum, and then I want you to move on. And I want you to move on. I want you to move on because, let's get back to the Dan Saladino book, Eating to Extinction.
Yeah.
We need biodiversity to live on our planet. Without biodiversity, we're going to lose these microclimates in which different bacteria and different things grow, different animals live, different insects live that we need in order to maintain our environment. And if we were talking about, you can't make big batches of agave spirits, and you can, or we wouldn't have tequila. But if you go to Jalisco it's like one big monoculture of Blue Weber in
Uh-huh.
order to create those big
Yeah,
batches.
yeah, and this is the same challenge that we have in agriculture in general with wheat, commodity grains, things like that, corn, bananas.
Yep.
We've lost that
Yeah.
biodiversity. Yeah.
That's exactly my point. So what I want you to do, like, if you try Zignum, maybe that gets you into it, and then move on
So
to
yeah,
the
so
next thing.
Zignum's kind of the gateway agave.
It can be, and there are other ones. I don't
Yeah.
want to,
But for
knock
me
things.
today, this is my gateway into a much more narrower path, I'd say. All
There you
right.
go.
So
So
which
then-
one should I try next?
So then the next one I want you to try is Via Suso. Via Suso is another green label. Yep.
Via Suso. Wait, no, here it is. Via Suso. Yes. Okay.
So Via Suso would have been made using a different kind of agave. So it's made using Salmiana. Salmiana is going to take something like 8, maybe 10 years to reach maturity. It's a bigger agave. And it would have been made in the state of Guanajuato. So, you were saying most mezcal comes from Oaxaca, and you weren't wrong, right? The Zignum's from Oaxaca. 92% in 2020, 92.7% of all mezcal came from Oaxaca. Something like 90% of that was made from Espadín. So, we're headed in the same direction as bananas, as like all these, as wheat. And so I want people to drink a broader range of agave spirits from a broader range of states. Let's go to
Mhm.
Guanajuato.
Mhm.
So what they would, and walk through this the same way, smell it,
Okay.
you know.
Right.
So the way that they make this spirit is they cook their agave in a steam oven, above ground brick steam oven, and then they mill it using a tahona, a stone wheel pulled by a horse. They ferment open air in essence, like sort of brick stalls, if you will, and then they distill in a copper still, a copper pot still.
Oh, okay. So copper pot in the end is the final stage of this process.
Yeah, but
And
a pot still as opposed to column still, which is also it's
So
more complex.
I say, yeah. Okay. So I'm doing the same thing. I've sniffed it. I've rubbed it on my hand. Again, definitely a totally different aroma quality than the first one. And I see
Right.
what you mean now about, this one. Well, again, I don't know that complex is the right word to use at this stage, but
I'd use it.
but it's definitely more, there's more aromaticity to this than the first one. And also there's a sweetness that I'm getting off of this one that I didn't get from the first one.
Yeah.
So it is, it's noticeably different for sure.
Yeah.
And of course, 7 years to mature. So let's say if they wanted to try to hurry it up and take it in 5 years, it just means that there's not going to be as much sugar potential developed in the agave if they take it too early.
Yeah, exactly, and that's a whole political issue. We just did an episode on Agave Road Trip about this. There's a whole political issue behind harvesting immature agave, and the truth is, like, I think once you've harvested the agave to use it for spirits, I'm personally not so sure that I see any immorality, if you will. Like, if you're not letting the plant go to seed to reproduce, I'm not sure what the issue is. Now, you're going to have much lower yields, but that's more of a production issue to my mind. But that's, there are people who literally would hang me for saying that.
Well, is the agave that's used to make this particular round farm raised, or is it in the wild?
This is farm raised. You'll almost never see Espadín in the wild anymore. That first agave you tasted, this one, the Salmiana, you will see in the wild, though these are absolutely farmed so that this particular producer can make large batches, largest batches. I mean, when I say large, I'm guessing their largest batch is probably, 3,000 liters, which is like 10 minutes for a major rum producer or whiskey producer.
That's amazing. So. And there's definitely, I did the 5-second thing on my tongue, and a totally different flavor profile. There's a much more, I don't know if I have the right language. It must be you guys must have a chart of some sort that define the different flavor profiles, because like they do with the wine tasting charts. But
Yeah.
there's a perfumey quality, a floral maybe perfumey quality that wasn't in the first one. And it just spikes in a whole different, like on a different angle than the first one that I tasted.
Yeah, to me, this particular spirit and most agave spirits made from the Salmiana agave have something that reminds me of poblano peppers. Not with like, there's no heat to it, but the flavor.
But now that you say it, you've put a word to it. Now that word is matching the flavors that I'm getting as I taste it again. Now, do you advise when people drink, if they're going to just take it in a shot glass and drink, that they hold it for 5 seconds before they swallow, and then you savor each sip that way, as opposed to just it's like down the hatch?
I do. I think there are plenty, not even think, there are plenty of people who can drink this and just throw it back and actually experience it. But I think the average person, particularly the average person who wasn't raised drinking these spirits, has a hard time appreciating it if they're not doing that with the small sips. And having said that, I'll get into a conversation with somebody while I'm drinking, and I'll stop paying attention. Then suddenly I'll find myself gagging because I took too big a sip. Right?
But it's kind of like drinking a fine wine. You want to get the most. If you're going to spend the money for it, you want to get the most pleasure from it. You want to get the most value from it. And if you're just drinking it mindlessly, you're leaving a lot of opportunity on the table, so to speak, or down the hatch.
On the palate,
on the palate. So and the other thing I was wondering, and I know that with wine tasting, they always tell you, make sure you get lots of aeration going, because you want to get you want to get some of those essences, those esters, into your sinus cavities, because that's where you taste a lot of the flavor in the sinuses more than you do on the tongue. Is this true with this?
Well, I've heard a lot of people say that. I've never said that because I've tried it and it never works for me. But I think that might be because I'm allergic to dogs and I live with them, so my sinuses don't exist.
Well, I know that. Yeah, when I've like swished in my mouth, sometimes I'll do the I'll just swish it around to kind of foam it up in my mouth, and all of a sudden, gases or something are being released, and I'm tasting nuances of that grape that I didn't taste when it first hit my palate. Suddenly, like you said, the black cherry comes out, or the currants, or whatever they tell you should be in there. And I always go, "Where is that black cherry I've been told about?" And the only way I could get it to come out was to really get a lot of air going in there. And I just tried this with this last sip of this one, is to just swish it a little bit. I didn't put enough in my mouth to really swish, but I was wondering if it would open up even more, levels of nuance.
Yeah. Well, you'll have to tell me.
I'm swishing right now. I used to laugh at that, because it's almost a cliche that wine geeks do all these rituals that they have, but it really does make a difference in flavor. In this case, I mean, just letting it sit for 5 seconds on the tongue releases so much flavor that you're not going to get that if you just drink it straight down. There's no way.
Right on.
Yeah.
So then let's move to the third one, which will be La Luna's Cupreata.
Okay.
Another green tape. Yep.
La Luna. Yep. I think I've got that one here. Yep. I've got it.
Okay. And so the significant difference now is the first two spirits that you had, the agave would have been cooked in a way that didn't use fire, right? When people say mezcal, if they've read a couple articles, the thing that stands out to them is mezcal is smoky. Well, neither of the things you just tasted had smoke anywhere really in the process.
Right.
So you wouldn't have tasted smoky. So, now we're going to move into that more traditional flavor profile with this, where the La Luna, it's made with a Cupreata agave. So again, not Espadín. The Cupreata is going to take something like 8 years to reach maturity. These are absolutely farmed Cupreatas. And this was made in Michoacán. So again, walking further away from Oaxaca. And Michoacán is a state also where you can make tequila or mezcal and certify it as either one in that state. Yeah.
I tell you, the smokiness comes through, especially after I rubbed it on my hands. And when I just sipped it from the cup. I mean, when I smelled it from the cup, I wasn't getting the smoke, but as soon as I warmed it up, that smokiness came out, and really, sort of it's the aftertaste, so to speak. I feel like I'm getting as much pleasure out of smelling them as I am from drinking them. It's just which I think proves that theory that we taste so much with our in our sinuses and in our olfactory side. I mean, it really is a pleasant experience, a wonderful experience. You can just get by on the aroma. It's the same thing with bread. I could get just as much joy out of smelling a fresh baked loaf of bread as I do from eating it. It's a different kind of pleasure, but I get pleasure, and same thing with this.
As a guy who hasn't had a fresh baked bread in a long time, I can promise you the smell, while it's beautiful, is not the same as the eating. I miss the eating.
Yeah, I'll bet. Well, we'll get you a gluten-free bread that doesn't disappoint. Okay, right, so I've done this one. So I should put some on my tongue now.
Yeah, do the whole process. So the way that they make this at La Luna is they cook the agave underground in a stone-lined earthen oven. This was what I was describing before, was that process where you're heating up the stones, you're putting the agave in, and you're burying it, kind of like you would bury a pig if you were cooking it in Hawaii.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and in fact, if you go to our Instagram page for I can't remember if it's either at Sacred Agave or at Agave Road Trip. I don't remember which one I put it on. In the highlights, we have a time-lapse video that shows the building of that underground oven. So you can see it's a giant mound when you finish. It goes down deep, but it's a huge mound above ground. So they would leave that to cook for 5 days in the case of La Luna, and then they mill it first by pull it out of the oven, and then they make it into smaller pieces by hitting it with axes initially, and then using in essence, like a wood chipper. And it's because it makes it easier. And these three spirits that I've sent you, these first three, are meant to be affordable to the common person. And so makes it a lot easier and a lot less expensive if you throw it through that wood chipper than if you mill it by hand or even use that stone wheel.
Yeah, I'll bet. What's the Instagram if I'm going to follow that?
It's at Sacred Agave or at Agave Road Trip. Either one. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna punch that at Agave Road Trip right now. And there we go. All right. So now I'm following you.
And then they would have fermented open air in wooden barrels, and they distill in these beautiful copper stills. They're not really copper pot stills. It's sort of like a bowl. It's a giant copper bowl that they put the tepache, the fermented agave, into, that they heat up with wood fire to get it above 173 degrees below 212, right? So the alcohol turns into a vapor, and then it leaves in this giant condenser. It's this huge wooden condenser on top. It's really beautiful.
Wow. So now we're talking about a little bit more, again, I hate to keep using this word because it becomes a cliche, but an artisan approach to distilling. Yeah.
Without question. Definitely an artisan approach. And
so this what is it called? Villasuso? How do you say it?
Villasuso.
Villasuso. It definitely is smokier. It's a smoky. It's the first one that really has smoke. And
Well, you mean the La Luna has the smoke?
Oh,
you're drinking La Luna now. Unless you cheated me here, you should be drinking the La Luna.
No, I had the La Luna. I forgot to move the other bottle out of the way, so I lifted up the wrong bottle. But yeah, definitely getting that smoky, aftertaste. And again, you were right at the beginning saying, hey, it's just going to get more and more complex as we go through this because there's nuances that just keep, I don't know, I call it has legs, just keeps coming. It's loyal. You taste it now and it's still with you 5 minutes from now, so I love that.
Loyal. I like that. That's a beautiful way to describe it.
Yeah. So that is the La Luna and from Michoacan. Mm-hmm. And again, is La Luna a brand name or what is that? Is that so that people see that it's something that could be available?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find it. Like those first three, you can find pretty easily in the USA.
Well, if we, I don't want to run out of time, so let's get through these other three before we.
Well, I don't, honestly, I threw those into the package just so you'd have something more complex. Because again, like those first three, I thought these are three great mezcals to start with. They're all three certified mezcals. The other three that I sent you is like, well, I know Peter. Peter's going to want to taste some crazy stuff too. So those are examples of really crazy things that are
let's
made.
do one. Let's do one of the
Sure.
crazy ones.
Sure.
Which one?
What's
I got
that?
a green label with the Victor, and then
Oh.
there's two with blue labels. The Head and Heart, and
Oh.
Head and Heart. Are these the same?
Well, so the two that you've got there that are Head and Heart are
Yeah.
part of a what we call agave road trip in a box. It's a taster set that
Oh.
we did with this mail order company. And the interesting thing between those two bottles is it's the exact same spirit made by the exact same guy, except that one of the bottles is 70%, I think, alcohol. It's the heads of the distillation, and the other one, yeah, you hit it. And
Yeah.
the other one is the heart of the distillation, which is going to be more like 50% alcohol.
So one says Puntas, and the other says Cuerpo.
There you go.
The
So the
Cuerpo.
puntas is the head, and then
okay,
the cuerpo is the heart.
Cool. Oh, I see. That's where you got the Head and Heart.
Yeah.
So, that's cool. Well, then let's try the Victor.
Yeah, so that's got to be Victor Ramos's
Victor
Tobalá.
Ramos. Yes.
Or is it Tobalá or
No,
Tobaziche?
it says Victor Ramos by Cuiche.
Oh,
Bec-
Bequiche. Bequiche. So that's yet again another agave. And Victor farms so many of these different varietals that are getting harder and harder to find. As we as a culture, and by culture I mean like literally globally, are drinking more and more mezcal. More and more of it is being made from Espadín. More and more of it is coming from Oaxaca. There's a fear that we're going to lose these wild agaves, and I would contend that happens most quickly because we tear out the wildlands in Oaxaca to build row after row after row of Espadín. So the more that I mean, this again, getting back to Dan Saladino's book, Eating to Extinction, one of the solutions to this problem of monocultures is just drink and eat more stuff. And and it's a delicious journey, right? Now we're back to your pizza quest. It's this delicious journey, and you're doing better for the planet when you do that than you just consume them. So this Bequiche, right, is going to take something like 12 or 15 years to reach harvest age. Victor Ramos.
Wow.
Yeah, Victor Ramos and his son Manuel down in Miahuatlán, Oaxaca, make this spirit. They use the same kind of stone-lined earthen oven. They've got a couple of oxen that pull their tahona, their stone wheel, to mill it. They ferment open air in wooden barrels right underneath this beautiful banana tree, and then they distill in with wood-fired copper pot still. And Victor never fails to make something beautiful. I show up at his place. He's got 15 different expressions, each one with a different agave. And you can't, in fact, I think I got this big hiccup from him because you go and you ask him, like, can I try what you have for sale? And he'll fill this up like two-thirds of the way.
That's
by the
like
time you get
quarts.
to that, by the time you're like into 5 or 6 of the expressions, forget it. You just hand over your wallet, and he takes all your money, and you're glad to give it to him.
Yeah, right, right.
Yeah.
Well, this is really, and this one here, when I tasted it, definitely. Well, first of all, this seems like maybe a higher
ABV.
proof. Yeah, 80. Yeah, and so it really spikes at first, but then as the alcohol sort of. I love the idea of leaving it on your tongue because if someone doesn't tell you to do that, sometimes you think you should drink it down fast. But then the flavors come out after the alcohol sort of dissipates. Then the flavors come out, and again a whole other range of flavors that weren't in the earlier ones.
Yeah,
and not wild in the sense that like sourdough is very different from regular yeast bread. It's not wild flavor or it's just as pleasant as all the others, but it's just different, and it's I can't even find the words to describe what that difference is. Let me try another sip. I'll get more loquacious as I drink one.
But I'll tell you, so Victor Ramos, back to that very first point I made, Victor Ramos is imported into the USA by a few different brands, most prominently of which is Malbien, but it's brought in not as certified mezcal. It's not certified. And guys like Victor, and Victor's not as at risk as some of these other small producers because he's got so many brands that are exporting him. But so many of these small families who are outside the denomination of origin, whose families literally are the ones who shepherded this multi-generational wisdom that causes us to fall in love with this beautiful romantic spirit called mezcal. These same families are literally the ones who are finding themselves on the outside of the denomination of origin, unable to utilize this word that is their cultural heritage, and make it even worse, as you and I drink more and more mezcal.
Yeah.
Right? The multinational liquor companies, and this is on us, not on them, but the multinational liquor companies come in and they buy up the farms from which these small families used to be able to access their agave. Because if you're a multinational brand, you pay millions of dollars for a brand, you need to secure that investment by securing this sugar source that takes years to reach maturity.
Yes.
So, yeah. So,
well, let me read what you write here as your sort of mission statement. Sacred helps improve life in the rural Mexican communities where heritage agave spirits are made. We help replant agave, build libraries, and make earthquake repairs. And in 2021, we will construct 2 rain collection systems, which we definitely want to talk about this because it's so important, to help mitigate water insecurity in 2 communities in Oaxaca. Join us in this work. Visit us at sacred.mx. So that's sort of as a snapshot of what you do. Before we run out of time, can you talk a little bit more? You've done so much. I don't want to use the word humanitarian work because I know you view it as this is just a joy for you to do. But you're doing something that's more than just enjoying the spirits here. You're doing something to help change the life and the quality of life for the people who work so hard down there.
Well, really, what I would describe it as, I'm trying to ensure that they can keep doing what they've been doing the way they've been doing it, because the fact that we keep drinking more and more mezcal, it's not coming from these families, is making it harder and harder for these families to keep doing what they're doing. So I'm trying to sort of mitigate the damage that we as a society are doing by drinking more mezcal. I'm doing that by providing them with free agave seedlings so that they have ownership of their own sugar source, by building these rain harvest systems, because as the climate is changing, they're running out of water down there. We did build those 2 rain harvest systems. One of them was delayed because of the pandemic. The comic was prior to the pandemic. We just started building our first library in southern Jalisco that's focused on regenerative farming to try and help support these practices that are becoming at risk.
Wow. Well, Lou, we're sadly coming to the end of our time frame here, but as I said, we could talk for hours about all this. I want to hear more. I'd love another time for us to talk about the libraries that you've been building there, these rainwater storage, cisterns and everything that you're creating. But for those who want to hear more immediately, go to Agave Road Trip, the Lou's podcast with Chavez on that as well, and
he shows up for our podcast, just not for yours.
Yeah, exactly. Well, tell him we're going to have to. He owes me around here too. But I'd love to continue. Maybe I can continue this conversation with you on your podcast sometime. And for the rest of you, please join him there. Join us here again each time we post. We're exploring the quest now. This year's theme it's Pizza Quest, but with the emphasis on quest. We're going to be meeting and talking with a lot of other people who, like Lou, have a fire in their belly for something that's just driving them, deeper into this journey of self-discovery. So, and we do it through pizza, but we do it through agave, we do it through cheese, through grapes, we do it through everything. And we want you to join us on this quest. So thank you all for being a part of this. Lou, thank you so much for sharing this
Oh, thank you,
incredible
Peter.
knowledge and energy with us. I love having these conversations with you. Your joy for what you do is infectious and in a good way, and you've left me with some good sipping here, and I will share the techniques that you've taught me with my wife and some other people so that we can continue to spread that knowledge.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Peter. I really do appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. And thank you all. We'll see you on the next episode of Pizza Quest.
This show is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.